for joining us, everyone. We're very excited to talk to you today about Saputo and how we can grow this company moving forward into the future here. So we're at Core Consulting. My name is Aiden McCall. This is Ella Lynn, Jenna Ballard, and Harry Hoti. And like I was saying, we're very excited to talk to you about this company and where you can go with it, because we see a very strong future for this company, especially as we move into the fiscal year of 2015, and as you can diversify your growth strategy beyond the traditional means of simply acquiring companies to actually expand into new markets. So when we look at this, we were identifying 3 key areas that we want to look at for this company and where you can grow. And we look at them as the 3 Ps. So people, places, and performance. And those are going to be the pillars of what we're talking to here today. How you can grow your people, how you can look at different places in the world, and ultimately how that will affect your performance. Now with that, this proposal that we do have for you is intended to increase your NPV for these projects by $508 million, increase your earnings per share by $0.78, and your increase in share price by $2.61. Now really quickly, what we're going to go through here is just a recap of the last couple of years. We've made some really interesting acquisitions from 2012 to 2014, so we're going to be using those in this presentation. And then we're going to go over some of the issues that we see with the company and some of the key growth drivers for the market and the industry that you operate in and how you can capitalize on them. We're going to give you a recommendation on what you can do with these growth drivers and then ultimately the implementation steps for that. Afterwards, we will conclude the presentation and we would love to have a discussion with you on how we can work with this solution and the presentation to best fit it to the company. Now with that, Jen is going to talk to us about the last couple of years.
There's a couple of key events that we'd like to highlight as they have implemented our decisions and the recommendations we'll make later on in the presentation. The first one being the acquisition in January of 2013 of Morningstar. This is a very large dairy producer in the United States, and because of this, we now have a very large stakeholder there, and for that reason, we won't be focusing our presentation on the United States market, as we believe you already have opportunities there for growth. And the fourth quarter of 2014, you also exited from Europe, and you acquired a controlling interest in WCB Foods, which is located in Australia and will play into a recommendation later in the presentation. We'd also like to highlight that today you have $500 million available in debt and a significant amount of cash available as well. Looking at this chart here, we took a look at how your company's been growing over the past couple of years, and what we see is that your revenues have been growing by about 5%, your net earnings and per share diluted net earnings are growing by about 30%, and your per share book value by about 10%. What this shows us is that the growth you've had over the past few years has really positioned you well for some expansive growth into the future. Now we're going to identify some of the main issues we see currently with the company. There's 3 areas we'd like to highlight: entrepreneurial spirit, product diversification, and developing markets. And I'll begin with the entrepreneurial spirit. So what we have seen is that Emmanuel Saputo is the entrepreneur and founder of the company. However, he has now passed on the role of CEO to his son, Lino Saputo. And with this change in leadership, there's a bit of a change away from that entrepreneurial spirit that's been founding the company. Additionally, you now have over 10,000 employees, and you're a very large, publicly traded international company, which makes it difficult to maintain that entrepreneurial spirit that your company has and would like to maintain. So the question is, how can you maintain that entrepreneurial spirit as you go forward into the future with this change in leadership and pursuing some risky opportunities? The second issue is product diversification, which Harry will talk about.
So right now your company's broken up into 3 sectors, with retail accounting for over 50%, and your small sector is industrial, which is only 13%. So our question here is, or our task here is, we want to diversify your product portfolio and focus on that industrial 13%. And why I want to focus on this is because you actually have your whey protein product within this sector. And the reason we want to do this is the reason we want to do this is because the trend is that consumers actually want more protein in their diet. It's actually the 3rd most requested supplement within your diet, higher than calcium, higher than essential vitamins and minerals, and even potassium. In addition to that, the whey protein industry is actually valued at $6.4 billion, and there's actually new products being launched at an annual rate of 15%, and that's growing. In addition to that, the whey industry is actually growing at almost as close to a double-digit growth rate annually at 9.7%, as well as the global trade is valued at increasing at 5.6%. So what this means is that the whey protein industry is vast and is growing at a very fast rate. So we think Saputo needs to leverage this and diversify its product portfolio to actually bring it in within the company and start profiting from this venture.
Now, we've also looked at some of the high growth markets that we will recommend your company goes into with your new product development. So the first place we're looking at is China. China has a large base of consumers who are largely unsatisfied right now. In the urban area, more and more people have access to refrigerators, and of course they want access to fresh dairy products. And in the rural area, more people are recognizing the benefits of consuming dairy products. So there's a demand in that area as well. Especially with the recent market in the suppliers playing field, there's been a large opening because of the exit of Fonterra from that market. Now, Fonterra was one of the largest foreign dairy players in China up until very recently due to their botulinum contamination scandal. So China has actually banned Fonterra product for the time being, which means it's a great opportunity for you to enter the Chinese market right now. We also recognize that Chinese government is focusing on funding to their local dairy produce companies, which means it's a great opportunity for you to partner with some of their local companies. Now, just the Chinese dairy market in itself, in 2010, it was valued at $36.6 billion in value, and it's growing at a 25% rate every year. Now, from 2007 to 2012, we were looking at a 46% growth rate in the infant formula industry. Today, that rate goes no lower, especially because one of their key suppliers of whey protein, which is a huge ingredient in infant formulas, has left. So that's a great opportunity for you to enter as Saputo in providing whey protein as a formula to infant formula, as an ingredient to infant formulas.
Second region we've considered is Africa, or more specifically Sub-Saharan Africa. What this chart here shows in red is that the World Health Organization recommends that each individual consume about 200 liters of milk per capita annually. And what you can see shown in the blue is different African countries and how much they are currently consuming. The highest is Kenya, at about 120 liters per capita, which is significantly below the recommended amount. And as you can see, the graph drops drastically. In Ghana, it's not even 10 liters per milk consumed annually. And this represents a huge opportunity for the dairy industry, as there is a need for dairy in people's diets, and it is also a social opportunity as well. So there are other indicators that this is a good opportunity, such as an expected 50% increase in dairy consumption by 2020, as well as that they have cows in overabundance. However, there are many threats also sort of associated with this industry, such as the location. The lack of infrastructure makes it difficult to transport into sub-Saharan Africa. Their breeding is not up to date, and they don't reproduce at the same rate as we see elsewhere in the world. There's many diseases and parasites that can wipe out an entire cow population, and their feedstock is also not of the same quality, making the cows less efficient. So what this means is that going forward into this African opportunity, you can't use your traditional method of just acquiring a plant that's already there, as it just doesn't work the same way it does in the rest of the world. So in our recommendation, we'll be suggesting something a little bit different that will help you tap into this African market.
So the next developing market we want to focus on is India. And being from India myself, I can attest that the copious amount of milk consumption that we, as the consumer, actually drink. And to be exact, it's actually 17% of the household expenditure is on milk products. At the same time, 50% of India actually owns 50% of the world's production, and that's a lot considering it's number one share. It has the number one share in terms of the world's supply of milk, at 108.5 million tons of milk. But what's interesting is that it only has a 0.3% stake in the world trade of the dairy industry. So what this means is that most of the milk that's being produced within India is actually staying within the country. And the reason for this is that the dairy industry is actually increasing at a 15% annual rate, while the supply of milk within India is only growing at 4.4%. So there's a huge gap there. And the reason for this is that the average cow in India actually only produces 5.2 liters of milk per day. And that's actually half the world's average. So in terms of efficiency, the cows are not producing enough milk as compared to the world average. And we're actually going to come up with a recommendation and a solution to show you how to fix this and to bring your efficient operations from Canada into India and to make this venture a profitable one.
So looking at the 3 Ps, people, place, and performance, how does this tie into our recommendation here? Well, whenever you look at opportunities, you like to do it with an objective, a strategy, and then a tactic. And so just to quickly highlight these, in terms of people, the objective here is, of course, maintain that entrepreneurial spirit. We believe the best way for you to do this is actually the strategy of fostering entrepreneurship within the company. We believe you can do this by incentivizing collaboration and innovation across your employees and inside the company. Basically encouraging the employees to do entrepreneurship, basically funding opportunities inside the company that will help the company grow internally. Then for the markets, we do believe the best strategy for you is to go into the growing dairy markets, specifically the ones that are using the recent acquisitions, so such as the ones in Australia, and then looking at new partnerships. And looking at this specifically, we do believe that the WCAV acquisition in Australia can be used to enter the Chinese market. You can actually start talking to the Tata group of companies in India to look at an acquisition in India to a dairy market. And then finally, Pacific, a British Columbia company you acquired, could be the best way of getting whey protein into the African market. Finally, performance, you do intend to be the top dairy producer in all of the markets you operate in. We believe that the best way for you to do this is to make sure you shift your focus to the high growth market and product segments. And the best way, I believe, is to go into the whey protein market and then India, China, and Africa, as we've outlined here. So looking at it with people specifically, how do you actually encourage this entrepreneurship or foster this entrepreneurship? We believe it first of all starts with the support. So you actually want to empower and encourage your employees to do so. So we believe the first thing is to start creative thinking courses for your employees and enable a collaboration platform across the company where people can talk about the different issues they see in the company and the opportunities they present themselves. If you encourage your customers and your employees to provide feedback on opportunities, issues, different growth areas they see in the company, basically from the opposite side, you can actually then innovate within the company, because if you provide people with this information and then incentivize it, you can actually have your employees looking for these opportunities for solving these issues that your customers are seeing. The best way to do this, of course, is offer rewards. So for example, you could do innovation bonuses, profit sharing opportunities, or promotion opportunities. So as an example here, if you were looking at the sub-Saharan market and you were selling there directly but just in the main cities, and you had many customers wondering about supply chain issues with getting into rural areas, which probably need the nutrients the most, what you would then see is if an employee was actually create a supply chain solution for that, maybe they would get an innovation bonus, or maybe they could become the project manager of that. So the incentive could be tied monetarily, or it could also be tied in terms of career growth, and we believe that's the best way to encourage your employees to work with that. Obviously, encouraging entrepreneurship is a little bit hard because that would mean divesting away from the company, but entrepreneurship is the best way to maintain that spirit. As you become a larger and larger company, it becomes a lot more difficult to do those riskier acquisitions and riskier plays for the company. So entrepreneurship is, we believe, the best way to focus the entrepreneurial spirit.
Now we're going to have a more detailed look as to how you're going to enter these different markets. So our second P, places. First of all, China. As we just talked about earlier, your recent acquisition of WCB in Australia places you in a very good position in terms of exports into China. There is a free trade agreement between Australia and China, which makes your export a lot more cost efficient. Now, just looking at the Chinese market in itself, first of all, there's an increasing demand, of course, for infant formula because of the recent scandals and the lack of supplies for infant formula. So it's a great opportunity for you to go in as a whey protein concentrate supplier for local companies, because we know that the government doesn't want to see any more foreign companies go in as a retailer. Again, the WCB already specializes in all sorts of dairy product production, which means whey protein concentrate production will not be an issue being exported out of Australia. Now, one of our recommendations for you is to look at some of the local large dairy producers in China as your first line of client in terms of selling this whey protein concentrate to. One of the companies we want to suggest is Monyo. So Monyo is one of the government's favorite, clearly, because the government has recently injected 30 billion yuan of investment to this company for them to further develop their infant formula line. And we know for a fact that they are currently looking for suppliers, especially foreign suppliers, because this makes their customers happy knowing that it's a quality product. So again, with China, in the next few years, this is the kind of revenue projection we foresee for your your partnership with Monyo, and is going to bring you a net NPV of just over 700,000 in the next by 2020. And this is a very conservative estimate because this is only from your partnership with Monyo. However, what we see is that as you take this one little step into China, you're going to be able to open up your reputation to Chinese dairy producers, and they will see you as a quality dairy ingredient producer.
Second place we're going to look at, as discussed before, with Sub-Saharan Africa. So right now, many trends are suggesting that there's an increase in consumer spending in the Sub-Saharan African region. This includes that poverty is expected to reduce to only 20% of the population by 2020. There's an increase in urbanization as well as a growing population. Over 50% of the population now has access to mobile technology, and it's a much healthier and safer business environment than what was once seen there. However, as mentioned before, there are a lot of threats that would make it risky to go in and just try and acquire a company. So what we're going to suggest that you do instead of producing liquid dairy in this market is to export from Pacific, a company that you already own, milk powder to the Sub-Saharan African region. The reason being that milk powder does not require refrigeration and has a much longer shelf life, making it much more convenient for this population since much of them do not have access to refrigeration. It's also much easier to transport and to store because it's in bulk, so it's cheaper and more efficient for transportation purposes. Has a lot of amino acids, protein, vitamins, and minerals, which is very important to this population. However, there is a need to build the awareness of the importance of dairy in this region, as well as of the brand Pacific. So what we've projected here by leveraging Pacific's milk powder to the sub-Saharan African region, that you'll increase your profits by about $300 million a year by the end of 2020.
So moving on to the last developing market, as I mentioned before, the demand for milk, the milk industry is growing by 15, and the supply is only 4.4%. So there's an opportunity there because of the large gap in the industry. As well, there's a challenge. There's a strong protection of the domestic market by the Indian government. This is placed by the high tariffs of actually exporting our goods within the country. So we can't do that because we can't compete with the local competition within India. So what we want to do is we actually want to partner up with Tata, just like Starbucks did when they partnered up with Tata to go and actually offer Starbucks within India. We're going to mimic that exact same 50-50 joint venture and actually purchase the business. But the reason we're seeking out Tata is because Starbucks actually grew their storefront by 40 within a matter of 17 months, which is their highest growth rate in that company's history. So we want to mimic exactly what they did, having a joint venture going in. So what we want to do is, because Tata offers this local expertise and we bring that dairy expertise and knowledge and management, we're actually going to buy Heritage Foods, the dairy division. The reason we're going to do this is because their dairy division is actually one of the leading dairy producers in India. But at the same time, they have poor performance in other segments. So their retail division is not doing very well. So this is actually undervaluing Heritage Foods' current value. And that's why this is the right time to actually purchase it, because it's undervalued. So we're going to actually acquire Heritage Dairy for $500 million, and we're going to get incremental value gain of about $650 million. And the way we're going to do this is the way we're going to make this a more efficient process and actually profit even more from this acquisition of Heritage Dairy is we're going to actually track cows using technology to see the feeding habits and their diet. As I mentioned before, their cows aren't producing as much as the world average. So what we're going to do is we're going to start feeding the cows proper diets and nutrients, and that's actually going to increase their output through a least cost balanced ration. So in the long run, we'll actually be feeding the cows less, but because we're offering better nutrients and better diet, they're actually outputting more and they're actually living a better lifestyle. So what this is going to do in the end is it's actually going to double our revenues. So if we went in India and we just purchased Heritage Dairy, we didn't do anything, didn't make it any more efficient, we'd be making $2.1 billion per year. But the fact that we're going in and we're actually making the operations more efficient, we're actually going to double our revenues to $4.8 billion by the end of 2020.
Now, let's have a quick look at the performance indicators. So a quick breakdown of all the 4 projects that we're recommending. Your largest profit intake is going to be from your outlay of retail lines in Africa, as well as the acquisition in India. So for Africa, we're seeing an NPV, 2020 NPV of $370 million and $140 million for the Indian market. That brings, all of these projects bring your total NPV by 2020 of $508 million. Now, with $508 million added to the value of your whole company, what this means for your shareholder is an increase in share price of $2.61, as well as an earnings per share increase of 78 cents.
Now, looking at the timeline of how you can implement this into the company, we do believe that the people aspect is the first and most prominent and simplest one to implement. We do believe that just by offering the creative courses and the access to the information from your customers, you can begin to encourage your employees to actually look at these opportunities and analyze the issues that customers feel the company has or the feel the market has. By the end of 2016, we do believe that you can start putting out these innovations and actually offering these bonuses, etc. And the goal is to have 15 innovations invested in by 2020 at about $100,000 per year over 5 investments per year. So 20,000 on the average. And then we're looking at the places here. We do believe China, simply because you do have that acquisition in Australia as well as the free trade. It's one of the simplest markets to get into. This company is actively looking for suppliers, so it's one of the simplest markets, one of the easiest markets to get into, and represents a very high growth potential because it's really primed, essentially a great time to get into the market. In terms of Africa, it's a little bit slower. There is a lot of infrastructure lacking, and so you will have to repurpose a little bit of the Pacific brand to actually make this work with it. And then India, obviously there's the partnership with Tata and the acquisition of Heritage Foods, so we push that back to the end of fiscal 2016. Now, we do understand that you have recently left Europe and you do have assets in Latin America, so we haven't focused on those simply because you're probably suffering from a little bit of shock with Europe. You were just kicked out from the market, as well with Latin America. You do have a strong position there. We don't believe that the major growth areas are there for you right now. We're more focused on getting you into these strong, very strong emerging markets, getting a different market presence. And so you came here looking for an entrepreneurial spirit and a lack of presence in developing markets. We believe the best way to do this is to foster employee entrepreneurship and move into these 3 high growth segments. And with that, we would love to have a discussion with you about this opportunity and some of the challenges you may see. Thank you.
So I have 2 questions for you. All right, thank you. So the first question is related to the Indian strategy. All right, so you're saying you want to increase the productivity of the cows and to generate more milk. You know how is that usually done? By injecting the cows by agent and chemical agents for them to continue producing milk throughout the year. And the quality of the milk is definitely not the right quality versus, an organic. So is this socially responsible? You're the next generation of managers. You're here to basically send a message on behalf of Saputo to the world. Is this socially responsible to produce lesser quality milk for countries like India?
So that's not the process we're recommending for improving the efficiency. You want to go to the efficiency slide? So the reason that the cows are less productive is usually a factor of what they're being fed. So food is the #1 cost that goes into the raising cows, and it's usually what influences their productivity the most. It's a very high fixed cost for farmers, and so in order for them to be more productive, what they actually need to do is use higher quality food, which costs more, but increases their output.
What does that mean? What is a high quality food?
So
what do you feed them?
I'm not an expert in the farming industry. I'm not exactly sure what the proper food is for them, but the #1 factor we found through research that increases cow productivity is when they're fed proper food. And we did also find through our research that in India, a lot of the food that they are being fed is not up to standard, not up to quality. So by improving the quality of food they are fed, you can drastically increase their productivity.
Would that increase the cost then?
Yes, it does increase the cost and an upfront fixed cost, but it increases our productivity more than the fixed cost increases it, making it a bigger gross margin per cow.
Is this a fact what you're saying? Is this like a
Yes,
study that you know? Or?
Yes, this is from the research we found.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I got 2 questions for you. If you could go to the slide, just the financial takeaway. Perfect. First question. I'm a financial guy. All this to China. We're a $6 billion company. And we're going to go to China for $700,000. If I say that to my boss, he's going to laugh at me. So, are you sure that? Why do you recommend a China strategy for only $700,000?
Do you feel like that is too small of an amount? Is that your main concern?
We're a $6 billion company, and we're going to make an NPV of 700,000. That's drop into the ocean.
Again, with our recommendation of going to China right now, it is literally just your first foot in the door. Because we understand with China, there's a lot of concerns with, for example, policies and government corruption being very difficult for foreigners to first enter. So this is a very, very small step, we understand, but we feel like it's very important for you to first make that connection with, for example, another company in China right now, so that you can have a better understanding of what the market is like. It is simply step 1, and that is why the figure is very small. It's we don't want to say it's a high risk thing, because we understand they are desperately looking for producers right now, but again, we want to make a safe move into China for your future benefits.
India now. What if you can't do a partnership with Tata or buy Heritage Foods Dairy Division? Is your strategy still the same?
Well, with India, we do recognize it as a high growth market. The best thing about Heritage is that it is one of the leading producers. And so what the issue here is that Tata would give you basically all the market knowledge you would need for the Indian consumers, as they basically cover such a diverse range of products. So if you are not able to look at Heritage, we don't believe that there is a major partner that you could go into and you could actually improve the efficiencies with as well. You wouldn't have the actual cash flow that you might want to go into India. You might want to prioritize more at going into different markets, such as the African market or the Chinese market. Heritage is the major one that we focused on, and because we do believe that it would be possible to be bought, simply because it is a very large company, and this is the only one that's essentially operating at a very high margin. And so the best way for it, if you buy it at a premium, they can essentially inject cash flow into their other market segments that might benefit the entire company as a whole.
I'd like to continue our trip around the world and ask about Africa, because that was the one I was the most surprised to see up there. And at the bottom of the slide, you talk about underconsumption of dairy presents a market opportunity and a social opportunity. I'm looking for a profit opportunity. So when you say a social opportunity, it almost sounds like I need to be extra specially nice to them and I'm doing them a favor, and it doesn't sound like it's bringing money in at the end of the day.
Yeah, so what we mean when we say it's a social opportunity is that although you'll be making money, you're going to also be improving the health of the sub-Saharan African market. So yes, as you can see from the financial slide, it has our biggest NPV of all the projects we're suggesting. So you definitely are going to be making money, but at the same time, you're going to be improving the quality of life for that population. Because what they do right now is drink unpasteurized milk, which makes them very, very sick. There's even a lot of baby deaths as a result from drinking this milk. So you are going to be improving their quality of life while making money.
Now, you had just brought it up, and it was my big question is, we're looking at Africa, it really is basically close to 80% of our NPV. How are we going to draw that much NPV out of one single product? I'm talking about bringing powdered milk over. So please take me through where that number came from and how it is that we have all these great strategies that bring 700,000, 100,000, then all of a sudden powdered milk's going to bring $370 million all of a sudden. I really don't understand that number. It seems a little out of line.
We understand your concern. What we're really looking at for the sub-Saharan Africa is, okay, if your target market is the 75% of the market who do have access to clean water to actually make use of that milk powder, we're recommending you bring in. And we're actually only looking at a target goal of 15% capture rate for that market by 2020. So it's a conservative growth rate. However, that does mean, so we're also recommending that you sell these milk in small cartons in order to accommodate the current market there. And simply because of the large population there, it does bring you quite a bit of profit through that sales.
Okay, let's see the profit on, like, where do you come up with that?
Here, go back. So sorry, this slide here is just our assumptions. So what we, in calculating the NPV, what we've assumed is that of the 37% of that top number there, that's the total population, 37% of that has access to clean water, so they're the only ones who can technically make the powdered milk. We assume that we're going to capture 15% of that. So then, if we're selling it at $3 a bag, and about 20 bags purchased per year per person in that market, because they're very small. If you go to the next slide. So then here we've had our other assumptions. So if we go to the market capture, that 15% is until 2020. We're starting with only a 1.5% capture rate in the first year. And then it shows our net profit there. We've used a WACC of 25%, because we realize that it's a risky business, so we've used a higher WACC to calculate the present value. And then if you just sum up the present values, you get our NPV.
Okay, and who's our competition in this market? Because you're looking to take a pretty big chunk of that market based on your assumptions. Who are we competing with?
The main competition is the unpasteurized milk. There are some companies that try and sell powdered milk. We weren't able to find like a technical breakdown of percentage-wise, but from what we saw, most people are drinking either no milk or the unpasteurized milk.
And the main thing with that as well is, because of the lack of infrastructure, many people are wary about bringing in pasteurized milk into it, so liquid milk into the market, because it's so difficult to get to rural areas, for example. And that's where the dry milk essentially was the best option for this market, because it can be moved around much easier at a lower cost.
Well, my next question is about marketing and how you're going to position the company. Okay, so when you're saying to the rest of the market, you're saying, I'm going into China. Basically, I'm making a deal with McGill, and the slight possibility that you become successful in there. What keeps other Australian companies, dairy companies that are bigger than the one you just acquired, going into China and doing the same thing, and very quickly taking over your market?
Yeah, we understand that there may be lots of competition. Number one, we feel like with Wonu you do have a high chance simply because they're actively looking for a supplier right now. And for you right now, because of your low cost margin, for example, right now you're selling milk to Africa for about you're selling whey protein to in the Indian market for about 80 cents per 100 grams. And with the Chinese market, what most companies are paying is actually, I believe, $1.77 per 100 grams. Yeah, about $1.77 per 100 grams. So that's actually the market price. We're suggesting you go in, $1.81 per 100 grams. So you actually do have a lot of room to even lower the price that you're selling this to them at to be competitive.
No, but I mean, like, my question is, those bigger dairy companies in Australia, they're not going to watch you and just look at you doing that. You're coming to play in their backyard. They will lower their costs and they will do whatever you're doing and be more competitive, because you have a small company in Australia. You're not going to export Canadian milk or South American milk that's not your strategy to China. you have a local, small
Yeah.
to mid-sized company in Australia, and you're trying to base your whole Asian strategy on it. While the bigger guys in Australia are gonna compete with you, and they will take you down very quickly. They're not gonna let you do this.
Yeah, we understand, but one of your core competencies is how cost efficient you are. So we do believe you have a strong position in terms of just being able to offer a product at a lower